Hey everyone, this is Adam from the CryptoBasic podcast, and you're here for another one of our 101 series of episodes where we break down how a project works from the ground up. Today we decided to do something a little different. We're actually doing the Decred 101, and we're going to have Ricuard on the show, who's a part of the team. Well, he's kind of a part of the team, but you'll find more about that in the episode. And that's episode 180 of the CryptoBasic podcast. Enjoy it. It's a good one.
Decred is it's pretty low drama.
Cool.
Which if you're looking for drama and entertainment, it's not the most entertaining project in that respect. But
this is not your Game of Thrones replacement for the week, ladies and gentlemen. All right, welcome to our first attempt at a 101 series with somebody on the team. Basically, I realized we're idiots, so here we are. We decided to go to the source. And today we're talking about Decred, and we have Ricuard, which is a pseudonym I figured out as we started this call. And he is the research and strategy-ish something with Decred. So why don't you give the listeners kind of a quick version of who you are, what you do with Decred, and then we'll jump into the project.
Yeah, so I work on research and some degree of strategy, and it could be a list of any number of things, really. I basically just help out wherever I see a gap, something that needs doing for the project, somewhere I can be useful, bring my sort of skills to bear. That's more or less what I do. For the purposes of the website, I thought research and strategy was a pretty good way to sum it up, but it spans a whole range of things from I've written a fair bit of the documentation, and I do reporting on the project. I do a Politeia Digest, which is a weekly or bi-weekly newsletter. I contribute to the Decred journal. I've done some testing and given some feedback about Politeia and stuff like that.
So for the listeners who are like, wait, why couldn't he just say he was the CEO of, or the chief of research and strategy? We're going to get into that, but basically Decred is one of the projects that's run with a DAO. So titles and specific things like that don't necessarily exist for most of the people that work on the project.
Yeah, we don't really have titles. We can sort of make up titles that make sense when they're needed, but it's nobody really goes by them or uses them for much of anything.
Yeah, that's I like it. I love everything about DAOs. Most of my own personal investment portfolio in crypto is targeted towards DAOs. I want to let the listeners know that, one, this is not a sponsored episode. You did not pay us anything to get on here, and nor did the DAO. And two, I don't own any Decred at this point, so it's important for me to mention my biases if I were to have them. So can you give us the quick elevator pitch of what the Decred project is, what they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I can indeed. I'm actually going to read it out because we went over this as a community not so long ago, and we all agreed on a good elevator pitch. So here it is.
Oh, cool.
Decred is a community-driven digital currency designed to be a superior store of value for generations to come. Its transparent governance system and unique hybrid proof-of-work, proof-of-stake consensus mechanism make it adaptable, self-sustaining, and ultra-secure. Decred empowers everyone involved to collectively determine the rules and budget. That's it.
That's pretty cool. So I am a governance nut when it comes to these different projects, which is why I'm so excited to learn about Decred and how everything works and all the functionality. And also, I don't understand why I haven't looked it up. Sometimes I get to this point where I'm like, there's so much to look into. I don't know if I want to look into it. And I should have looked into it because obviously during our bear market, it might have been a really good choice to invest in something like this. I don't know how they've been doing, but
it's been holding pretty steady, holding pretty well. But yeah, cool. It's obviously not been a great time for a lot of the altcoins.
Yeah, I mean, we're in this interesting spot on the show where we don't really talk about prices, which I know is what a lot of people want to hear. They want to hear, there's a triangle that we can draw on this chart, and all of a sudden you should buy this coin because, shapes. But we try to get to the fundamentals of everything. So that's what these 101 episodes are all about. And we always start with like the history of the project. So, it's kind of where, if anything interesting happened, if the ICO was particularly special, was it a fork from another project originally? Where did Decred kind of start?
All right. So first things first, there was no ICO.
Good.
Decred started about 3 years ago in February 2016, but its story goes back a few years before that. It was started by a group of developers. They're called Company Zero, or they changed their name to Company Zero. Before Decred, they developed a Bitcoin full node implementation, BTCD. And through their experience of doing that for a couple of years, they observed a number of significant problems with the Bitcoin ecosystem. They didn't really like how the governance of the Bitcoin protocol was happening. They felt that they were to some degree frozen out by the developers of the Bitcoin Core implementation for the full nodes. They perceived a deficit in terms of funding for development of the software that Bitcoin needed. So it's basically relying on donations or corporate sponsorship or people already being independently wealthy to be able to contribute. So, we'll get to Decred in a minute, but they've resolved that by adding a 10% of the block reward treasury into Decred. And the third problem that they had with Bitcoin, or the third issue they perceived, was that proof of work miners have too much power. So they wanted to build a project that was like Bitcoin and served a lot of the same purposes, but resolved these issues. And the way that they did that was to add a proof of stake component in a sort of hybrid with the proof of work. So proof of work does the same things it does for Bitcoin. The proof of stake then is added in to add governance. So, firstly, it diminishes the power of the proof of work miners because every block calls 5 proof of stake voters randomly out of a pool of about 41,000. And those specific tickets, at least 3 of them have to respond and have to vote yes on that block for the miners to get their reward. So it gives the proof of stake voters, explicitly gives them power over the miners, and they basically get to decide what counts as appropriate miner behavior. And if they don't like something that the miners are doing, then they can vote to withdraw their block rewards.
You mentioned something interesting. I want to stop you real quick.
Yeah.
You said the incentive to develop Bitcoin was not there and they'd be operating in a deficit. I couldn't agree with you more on that because we're kind of in a spot where, because Bitcoin's gone up for such a long period of time, up until last year, that it kind of was funding itself because the coins were just becoming worth so much more. But in a spot where you're looking at a bear market or even just very slowly increasing value, the incentive to develop on the Bitcoin network needs to be gaining more control over the Bitcoin network. That's why you have Blockstream spending so much money developing something like the Lightning Network, because it's in their best interest to develop something like that and have Bitcoin wrapped around it. So it's not surprising that Bitcoin went in those directions with SegWit and Lightning Network and that kind of thing, rather than try to push something through a deadlocked governance. And it was something that hadn't really crossed my mind necessarily until you said it.
Yeah, it's it's something that occurred to me quite a long time ago when I first learned about Bitcoin. Is what's the incentive for the people that are actually developing the software? And I couldn't really find an answer that I liked, apart from maybe that some developers who really liked it bought some coins and the coins went up in value. So now they don't need to worry about money and they can spend their time on Bitcoin. But that's not really I don't think it's a long-term funding model, because it's just not, is it? You can't, people coming into it now, do they have to bring enough money to buy Bitcoin and then self-sustain, or how does that work? I don't know.
Yeah.
But what I like about Decred is that there's a very clear answer to how it works. There's money to develop this project, and people who want to contribute can get paid to do so.
So was it a fork of either Dash or one of the other kind of hybrid models?
No, it started as it's a software fork of BTCD, because that's what they'd already built. So they didn't throw away what they already built. They just switched over to build on all the proof of stake aspects, and then with those it became Decred. It launched with its own Genesis block from scratch. We're talking about the history of the project now, so I should say that at the very beginning there was a pre-mine of coins. There's 4% of the total supply went to the developers, and 4% went in an airdrop to anybody who signed up. There was a thread on Bitcoin Talk forum, and about 3,000 people signed up and for a free airdrop, and they each got 282 Decred coins whenever it launched. So that's another kind of interesting thing about the pre-mine for developers, is that they worked out the price or the equivalent like dollar price of the coins that they received, because they took the costs that they had in terms of bringing the network up, like developing the software, getting it to a point where it's ready to launch. And then they basically said like, well, for the cost of that work and 4% of the coins, like what does that work out at? It worked out at about 50 cents per Decred coin. So you could say that they effectively bought those coins at the beginning for 50 cents a piece.
What is the price today? I didn't even look. I should look
like
before. I'm so bad at price. Wow, there you go. Good job. Good call. I love that the pre-mine that was given to the developers was equaled to the community.
Yeah, I
don't
like
think
that.
you see that a lot.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And like it was an airdrop as well. That's pretty nice. They did that because with the proof of stake component, like they needed the coins to be like fairly reasonable. Like they needed people to have them at the beginning, because unless people have coins that they can use to buy tickets, which is how the proof of stake system works, then there weren't going to be anybody, like there was not going to be nobody that could vote on the block, so it wasn't going to work unless there was already a decent chunk of Decred out and around there.
Was there any kind of like qualification? Did they have to have a certain amount of processing power on their computer or anything like that to sign up, or was it just anybody who was interested in the project was sharing in the airdrop?
It was just anybody, yeah. They did like some screening to try and prevent people from signing up multiple times with like different email addresses and stuff. But like it was really just anybody who was interested.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, was there any like drama, or a lot of these projects had crazy things happen at the beginning of them as they're trying to get their footing? I didn't look anything up, so I'm not trying to pull anything specific out here if there was, but was there any sort of like, yeah, the project almost failed here, or we had this founder leave or anything like that?
No, not really, no. Decred is like, it's pretty low drama.
Cool.
Which if you're looking for like drama and entertainment, it's not the most like entertaining project in that respect, but
this is not your Game of Thrones replacement for the week, ladies and gentlemen. You look elsewhere.
Yeah.
You won't find that here. All right. So that kind of brings us up to present day, more or less. I mean, we're going to go into all the different things about why it works and how it works. But as far as like the history, was it started anonymously, or is there a person who started the project?
It was started by a group of founders. Some of them are pseudonymous. Like Taco Time was involved in, if you've heard of Taco Time. So they're pseudonymous. Someone called Ingsoc is also pseudonymous. But everyone else is, like all of the Company Zero developers are like, they use their real names and stuff.
So if you're interested in looking at who started the project, you can look up Company Zero. All right. So that's good. I think that's good enough for the history. We did a good job there. The next little section is kind of a joke where we do the rapid fire on the show. So we're going to do that. I'm going to do it with you. Cool. I'm just going to ask these questions and then you can give me the quick response. They're pretty easy. Is it a coin, a token, or a platform, or something else?
It's a coin.
Okay. And we've already answered this one. Proof of work, proof of stake, or something else? Hybrid,
proof of work and proof of stake.
Yep. And this is kind of a dumb question for Decred because, again, we've already answered it, but the mainnet is live, I assume.
Yeah, it has been for 3 years and a few months.
Would you consider it fully decentralized?
Yeah, like that's a fully decentralized I think it's very well decentralized compared to a lot of other projects, compared to most projects, because it's got the mining is with mining pools, like there are a few dominant pools, similar story to Bitcoin. But the proof of stake is pretty well decentralized. Like the coins have been circulating for a few years. There's like 40,900 tickets that have to vote. Those are pretty well, like those are all held by individuals. That's pretty reasonable decentralization, I think. It's got a low-ish, like I haven't looked at calculated myself, but I've seen it said that it's got one of the lower like Gini coefficients, so it's relatively like equal, the distribution, compared to other coins. Like it's the kind of top holders don't hold as much as like relative to other projects, which with the proof of stake system like counts when you consider how decentralized it is, because the evidence is that there are no like massive holders that like there's nobody that has like half the coins, like so they have like half the tickets, half the votes. That doesn't exist. Like there's the large holders have much lower relative like shares than they do for other projects.
Okay, well that's always good to hear. The rich list is something we look at when we talk about that particular thing and see how much power a small number of individuals would have over a network.
Yeah, it's good to look at that for sure.
And we're going to get into the governance. I'm like I said, I'm super excited about that part. Mm-hmm. That's going to be probably my favorite part of the entire interview. So stay tuned for that. That's in 2 sections. But for now, we're on to the most important question of all of the rapid fire questions. Do you think it sounds cool?
Yeah, I think it sounds really cool because it's got this kind of like self-sustaining aspect to it. That's the thing I like about it. The fact that it's funding its own development, it's funding its own proof of work, it's like rewarding the voters for taking interest in the project and actually like thinking about it, making good decisions. They have skin in the game because their coins are all locked when they buy tickets, so they're kind of in it for the medium to long term, like by definition. When you put all of that together, I'm not sure exactly how to describe it, but it's like it's got its own kind of engine built in, and it's going to be like driving itself forward for a long time.
So what does Decred mean? So to me, if I'm answering this question, if I was in your position as a researcher, I would say it doesn't sound cool because Decred, I don't know what it means. It sounds almost like a negative term if I'm just taking it in a vacuum. And, where if you're looking at something like, I don't know, Nano, it kind of works as in like the coins or the transaction fees are super tiny, I guess, or something. So does Decred mean something that I'm missing?
Yeah, it means Decentralized Credits.
Oh, okay. So okay. Like that makes sense.
Credits, as in like Star Wars.
Right.
Use of
Every
credits.
Sci-fi novel ever, they're always like, hey, give me some credits.
Yeah. Decentralized, like that's the aim of the game. That's what it's all about.
Okay, good. So yeah, that's what when I read that, just like the first time I ever looked at it, whenever you're making your stupid judge a book by its cover thoughts on a coin, that didn't pop out at me. But now that you say that kind of makes perfect sense.
This comes up from time to time. There have been a few times that people have suggested like renaming it because your sort of take on the name is not unique.
Yeah, I would imagine that, which is why we include that. It's like, because we know that whichever one of these projects we think will be ubiquitous or at least close to it, we know that the person who's sitting on their couch who doesn't know anything about crypto but has to use it needs to kind of get it when they see it. So Bitcoin makes sense. They're okay. It's, it works off bits and it's a coin. Cool. Litecoin makes sense if you know what Bitcoin is. But Neo doesn't make a whole lot of sense. How does that tell me anything about what that coin is?
Maybe AntShares is better.
Yeah, I don't know that AntShares is any better, but so I definitely like it. And it looks cool. Like the Neo logo looks cool at least. But anyway, we're not talking about Neo. Sorry. So this is, all right, let's get into the real meat of the episode. We want to learn about the entire ecosystem. Now, in this coin, normally we keep the governance separate. I don't know that that's possible. I don't know that we can talk about the features and structures of the Decred project without discussing the governance and how it works. So I'll kind of leave that up to you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to ask as many questions as I can to clarify this stuff. I think a good place to start is the proof of work versus proof of stake situation.
Yeah.
Getting a little bit more specific on that. And then also, is there any privacy aspect to it? Those together might be helpful.
Right. Yeah, like I agree. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense to keep the governance completely out of it. You can't really describe the structure without talking about the tickets and proof of stake. So to start with, it helps me to start with the kind of block reward. So Decred's block reward, 60% of it goes to the proof of work miners. Like I said before, like they're same role as Bitcoin, essentially. 30% of the block reward goes to proof of stake voters. And those are people who time lock some DCR in exchange for one or more tickets. There are around 41,000 tickets at any point in time, live tickets, because that's the sort of target size for the ticket pool. So there's an algorithm that changes the price of an individual ticket. The price goes up if there are more than the target number of tickets. If there are fewer than the target number of tickets, then the price goes down to incentivize like people to buy more tickets. So it's always striving for 40,960, I think, tickets in the live ticket pool. And
so
yeah,
let me stop you real quick. What is a good explanation for what a ticket is? Is that a separate form of currency, or is that used for the voting?
Yeah, it's just used for voting. That's its entire purpose. So
okay. So they're literally buying votes.
Yeah, like
more or less.
Yeah, a ticket is like so how it works is you buy a ticket. Once that matures after around a day or so, it's in the live ticket pool. And then, as I mentioned before, every block that's produced by miners, based on the hash of the previous block, 5 tickets are randomly selected. And the block can't exist. It won't be recognized as a valid block until at least 3 of those tickets have responded and voted yes or no to the contents of the previous block. So it's basically every block, there are 5 tickets being called randomly from the pool, and they each vote on to approve the previous block. And if they approve the previous block, then all the transactions stay, the miners get their rewards, everything goes on as normal. If they were to reject the previous block, then all of its regular transactions would be sort of rejected, and the block would be, I guess, emptied, if you like, apart from the ticket-related transactions. So the ticket voters would still get their reward, even though they sort of nuked the block.
So they can pretty much turn like a setting on whatever their software is. It says, yeah, we're approving blocks, or in the case that maybe there was a reorg attack happening,
exactly,
they can switch to no.
Yeah, so there's a default policy that unless people have changed it, all the voters are voting on this policy, which is that if the block you're being asked to vote on would cause a reorg of more than 6 blocks, then you don't vote on, you vote no for that. Or I think you basically just blank that. You just ignore those. Anybody who tries to make a block that would fork the chain like more than 6 blocks ago in history, according to like the current state as your node sees it, those blocks are just not going to get voted on. So if they don't get voted on, then they won't be accepted by nodes. They just won't feature in the blockchain at all.
So what would happen something like that if possibly ever orphaned a block that was legitimate, and then the transactions kind of didn't happen? Would that accidentally cause a double spend, or what would happen in that scenario? Or could it happen? I don't know.
It couldn't cause a double spend, no. What would so far, nobody, as far as I know, there's on the mainnet, there's never been a block rejected by the ticket voters because the miners have never done anything to warrant that.
And nobody's ever tried to attack the network because they see this and they're like, screw that. I'm not going to try. I'm going to go attack, I don't know, ETC or something.
There are much softer targets.
Yeah. We say this all the time on the show when we're talking about security. We're like, guys, you don't need to be a hacker yourself to stop yourself from being hacked. Just don't make yourself the low-hanging fruit, and they're not going to target you. Once you've got 2-factor authentication, once you've got all of these little tweaks in place, they're going to go for the people who don't have that are using password 1 for all their passwords.
So that's one of the reasons for the proof of stake system is it's been designed in a way to maximize the benefit that it brings for the security of the network. So a couple of contributors have worked it out to be roughly 20 times more expensive than a pure proof of work currency to attack with a majority attack, because of it's really hard to estimate that, because when you get into the detail of it, basically for someone to execute an attack like that with the hash rate, they would need to basically control half the tickets in the live pool to be able to do it with 51% of the hash power.
Right, with any sort of certainty.
Yes. So then it's obviously never happened, but there's a limited number of tickets available in each block. And basically, if someone was trying to acquire a huge chunk of tickets to execute an attack, they would pretty much be guaranteed to cause the price to go like massively up in the meantime, and they probably wouldn't be able to buy too many tickets before it became like prohibitively expensive.
So when they buy the tickets, they lock up the money for how long? So
it's because the tickets are called to vote randomly. You can't really know for sure. The way it works is that on average, a ticket will be called after around 28 days. But,
okay, so the money's only released when you get picked.
Yeah, but there's a timeout on it. Like after about 4 months, there's like an expiry time on it. So if you're unlucky, happens I think around 0.5% of the time, where your ticket won't be called for like 4 months, and in that case, your ticket expires and you can revoke it and get your Decred back that you used to buy it with.
Okay, so let's say I was an attacker and I bought a bunch of tickets, and the network notices that I'm doing some sort of an attack. Would they then be able to have any sort of a mechanism in place to take the locked up money? I know some of the projects or coins will have a negative incentive for when somebody is acting in like a bad way. So would that be forfeit if they noticed you were doing a reorg of some kind?
There's no way to do that. It's basically when you lock the coins, like you're the only person who can unlock them. There's no way for somebody to take your locked coins from your ticket. That's not
okay.
possible. So
it's strictly a skin in the game incentive for you to vote correctly when it comes up.
Yeah, the idea is that because your DCR is locked for potentially like 4 months, that you won't it's to stop people from buying like 10,000 tickets today and like voting on something like crazy that's going to destroy the network and then selling all their DCR like as soon as it goes through, just kind of like dumping it all. The lockup time is so that it's not possible to do anything like that. Once you buy the ticket, you're committed until it votes, which is potentially up to 4 months. So the idea is that you have a skin in the game, you have an incentive to try and make good decisions, because like if you do something stupid that hurts the price, then you're gonna like pay for that along with everybody else.
Which is one of the things that I love about any of the projects that use like DAOs. Like we haven't gotten into that, which I'm sure we're going to, but the incentive is we need to keep the coin functioning well. We need to keep it getting more adoption, because the price will go up if we make good decisions. And that is that doesn't exist on necessarily some of the other networks, because the good decision could be we just need to get the Ethereum Foundation to give us money for developing a project. We don't really care if it's a good project or not. And, that kind of thing, which I don't know that we see that very often, but it's a thought. In game theory, you always have to think about all the different ways that somebody can exploit a system. And it sounds like so far Decred's doing a good job of that. So we've covered the reward for the tickets, and we've covered the reward for the miners, which leaves some left over, right? Yep,
that's the 10% for the treasury that funds like work on the project. So that's basically I'm a contributor, a contractor. I get paid for some work that I do on the project. That's where the Decred that I get paid and all the other contractors get paid. That's where it comes from.
So let's say we were a little crypto podcast and we wanted to submit something to the Decred DAO and say, hey, we're going to have a 101 episode on your coin. Can we get some pay? How would we go about doing that?
Okay,
we're not going to.
You left it a bit late.
Yeah.
There's a proposals system called Politeia, which you can submit a proposal there. It's basically off chain. The voting is like off chain. It doesn't happen on the chain, but it relates to the chain in that only people with live tickets can vote on those proposals. So you make a proposal there and it gets discussed for a while, and then it goes up for a vote. And if it gets 60% or more yes votes, then it signals the okay for that project to get funded. And then you go ahead and do the work, and then you submit like an invoice effectively for payment, and then that gets processed and you get paid.
That's pretty cool. So is the 60% static, or does that change?
That's static, like definitely. So far, like that's been 60% for everything. It's like a kind of smallish supermajority, so that we don't make kind of like really marginal decisions to like fund things, and then they might get rolled back like pretty easily if people change their mind. But it's
right.
Just to have a bit of a supermajority. So there's another, like, I think I should mention it now probably because we might forget about it otherwise. There's another kind of like governance that the tickets are involved in, another kind of voting. There's actually three kinds. Okay. So there's the block voting, which I talked about before. That's kind of the foundation of it, voting on the previous block. There's the politeia voting, which we talked about, which is about how to spend the treasury decred. But there's also on-chain voting to approve changes to the consensus rules of the network. So it's got it's built into the network that the only way you can change the consensus rules is to follow a particular process where you release a new version of the software that contains the new like rules embedded in the code, but it's latent, it's not activated. And then all of the miners and voters on the network, they have to like voluntarily upgrade to that new version of the software. And when enough of them upgrade, that'll trigger a vote on chain, which lasts for about 1 month, where in every block, like the 5 tickets that are called, they also they can vote additionally on whether or not to approve this change to the consensus rules. So that has a 75% supermajority requirement on that one. So you can't change the consensus rules unless you have the overwhelming support of the voters that have locked their decred to get tickets.
So from a game theory perspective, I'm always scared when the requirement is that high. I can't remember which coin we were just discussing, but they had an 80% requirement. They did something very similar. It might have been Tezos, yeah, where they basically run the testnet for a period of time, and then they need 80% to say yes to go forward.
Yeah.
I can't get 80% of people to agree on anything in my life. I mean, you tell people the earth is round and it's damn near, like, how are you going to get, yeah, anyway, the earth is round was a bad example, but there are definitely some very like global warming or climate change, for instance, very provable scientific fact, but you cannot get somebody to admit it because, reasons, right? So when you have something like a contentious upgrade, for instance, like with Bitcoin, which the bigger block sizes led to Bitcoin Cash, but you were looking at, even if you factor in all of the political machinations of, all of the community wanted Bitcoin Cash, but like the core developers wanted Bitcoin regular, blah, blah, blah. I don't think they would have had anywhere near 80% in either direction for that ever. So it just would have been kind of stagnant. Is there any sort of like method in place or like a quorum requirement or anything like that to offset if you couldn't get to 75%?
The kind of quorum requirement on the on-chain votes is pretty low, actually. It's only like 10% of the tickets actually need to vote yes or no for the vote to be considered valid. But
which makes sense because it's hard to get people to vote even when they have an incentive.
Yeah, it's actually been pretty decent. So far, it's been like 60 or 70% on average for the on-chain votes. People voting, like, they vote yes. It's been pretty rare for people to vote no, because with the consensus rules changes, like, it's the reason the requirement is set high is because I think the rationale is that you shouldn't be making a change to the consensus rules unless it has like really broad support from the ecosystem as a whole. You don't really want to be changing the consensus rules with like a slight majority. I think the idea is that it makes it so that you have a way to know if there is this broad support for the change you're proposing, but you need that support. You have to, like, there's a way there to know whether you have it or not, and that's the important thing, I would say. Because with the Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash example that you gave, like, I have no idea, like, what Bitcoin, like, holders wanted to happen with that. This, like, not a clue.
Right, yeah,
like, it's been, there's obviously, like, a lot of debate and discussion about it for quite a long time. But a lot of the mechanisms that are used to sort of signal, like the nodes, like the social media posts, like, it's all very gameable if you wanted to try and like astroturf it a bit. Like, it's quite doable.
Yep.
So for me, like the main thing is that there is this Sybil resistant like mechanism whereby the holders can decide if they want the change or not. And yeah, 75% is quite high. I agree. But the idea is that once you sign up to like Decred, and like they shouldn't just go like changing the rules on you, like for like without your consent. It needs to have the, like at the same time, like as an individual holder, you shouldn't be able to prevent everyone else from changing the rules. Like, but there's a balance there somewhere. And in Decred's case, it's been set at the 75% rate.
And the miners basically get no say. Their only incentive to participate is their mining reward.
Yeah. If they want to like keep some of their mining reward and like stake it for tickets, then they get a say. Like, and they're getting like 60% of it. So it's quite possible that they do like buy some tickets and get a say. But yeah, just being a miner doesn't entitle you to any say in the network's future.
Right. Well, and if they want it, they can grab it, which I kind of like. And the algorithm that you mentioned made me think about Bitcoin's hashing algorithm. Like eventually it gets much harder to mine Bitcoin because they want it to come out at a certain pace. Mm-hmm. So it seems similar, right? On the ticket side.
Yeah, I think it's broadly like similar kind of principles. Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. I want to jump back to the DAO. I know we're jumping around a little bit, but how much does it cost to submit a proposal to the community on the DAO for Decred?
It costs 0.1 DCR, which is a couple of bucks at the moment.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Yeah, that's like $2. Yeah. Wow, we screwed up. We should have definitely submitted this. You know that I know Dash. It costs like the last time I looked. I mean, Dash was the first coin we ever recorded a show for. It was awful. Don't go listen to it. we just sat down. And we're like, all right, we're doing this podcast. Let's record. What coin do we know the most? And it happened to be Dash at the time. We didn't release it first. By the time we released it, we're like even much better at podcasts. It was like our 6th or 7th released episode. And we had to apologize even then. So 180 episodes in, I don't even want to know how bad that sounds if you go back and listen to it. But at the time, it was hundreds of dollars to submit a proposal.
Yeah, it's gone up to like 5,000 because it's 5 Dash. Yeah, so like the price at 1,000, I think, for 1 Dash. So that would have been costing people $5,000 to submit a proposal.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, I think it's,
if you get it declined.
Yeah, I think it's way too high. Like I looked at Dash like before I looked at Decred, I think. And it struck me that like, wow, like this is an interesting system. I like that people can propose things and it gets voted on and they might get funded. But like several $1,000s to submit a proposal is just like way too much for me personally.
Yeah. It'll stop the troll votes or the troll proposals, I guess. So yeah, do you get a lot of those?
Well, like no, not really. But so that brings me on to like I really like Polity is an interesting platform, and this is part of the reason why. It's because it has so with Dash, like one of the reasons the fee is so high is because there's no filter on those. Like nobody can censor your Dash treasury proposal. Okay. So anybody that pays the 5 Dash can make the proposal. I've seen proposals put in which were like basically just criticizing the other masternodes or something like.
There was one to get rid of the CEO. I remember.
That's right. Yeah. So Decred there are administrators of Politeia and they can censor proposals. And I believe at this point, I think 2 proposals have been censored. The reason like Politeia took quite a long time to come out is that it's built on this principle of transparent censorship. So when you submit a proposal, you get what's called a censorship token. All of the Politeia accounts have a private and public key, cryptographic key. And the censorship token that you get when you submit a proposal allows you to demonstrate to anyone that you submitted it at a particular point in time. So if it gets censored by the admins, then you have some sort of recourse there. You can show the community that, hey, I submitted this proposal in good faith. Like I think it's a solid proposal and that you should be allowed to vote on it. But the administrators have said like, no, they've just kind of censored it. That's open to you as a proposal submitter in the case where, because that's the problem with censorship, right? Is that it might be fine to say that only like decent proposals get through, but when it's subjective, like, or when it's like not transparent, then it's open to abuse by the administrators because they could censor things that they don't personally they don't like the direction it would represent, they could censor it for that reason. And unless you can like show people that you submitted the proposal, then it's kind of your word against theirs, whether you actually did or not. So that, it's a bit of a...
I was just about to say, that seemed like a point of centralization, and you answered my concern before I even brought it up. Look no further than the subreddit for Bitcoin or the subreddit for RBTC to see what happens when a team that has the ability to censor has gone too far and they take out actual legitimate conversations because they're against, the narrative in a sense. So if at some point in the future there is a problem with Decred, let's say, I don't know if this could even happen, but like with Dash, they were saying, let's get rid of the CEO. They paid their thousands of dollars to submit that proposal because they believed that CEO needed to go of the Dash Foundation or whatever they were actually the CEO of. If somebody saw that and then one of the friends of the CEO happens to be the person who's deciding what votes get to go through to the platform, they can be like, no, this one's not accurate. They now have recourse to go to the community and say, this was just censored. I don't think it should be. And then what happens past that point? Can the community overturn the censor, or it's just kind of like they have to put social pressure on the actual people that censored the issue?
Yeah, so if it went that way, I think basically the administrators of Politeia, they would only get so many of those where they've kind of like censored something for ad reasons, and the community finds out, which they would do every time. If that happens a few times, then people are just gonna make an alternative version of Politeia. It's open source, anybody could do it. Spin up an alternative version and basically have a vote to say we're going to switch to this new version because the administrators of the old one are not playing fair anymore.
So would that vote go through the consensus rules, or would that go through the original Politeia?
It's a good question.
Obviously, sorry, I didn't mean to trip you up.
Obviously, it going through the original Politeia would depend on the administrators allowing it to go through.
Right.
So what's nice about that though is that in the end, it could go directly through the consensus rules. The consensus rules vote can do anything. So if it turned out that if people lost faith entirely in the people that were running the sort of Politeia platform or making the payments, they could have a consensus vote to switch those treasury coins over to a different address or a different key, and basically give the control of those to someone else. So that's underpinning it all is this kind of on-chain vote to change the consensus rules, because if you can do that, then you can do just about anything.
Yeah, and it looks like they've really thought through a lot of this. So when it gives the point of censorship a significantly less easy path to censoring something. So I need to be certain when I say no. I'm going to bring up, this is not really an applicable example, but when I'm a fantasy football commissioner of my fantasy football league and I veto a trade that is public, and I need to say why I said that trade's not okay to go through. And if there is accountability rather than not being public and me saying, no, that post was just a shit post, there was nothing in there, there was nothing of substance, and the person can say, what do you mean there was nothing of substance? It's all right here, this is the substance. It means that you have to be a little bit more pointed in your decisions when you're doing that, and ideally then you would make a decision in the best interest of the governance system.
Yeah, so that it's what I found with Decred as I've got to know it is that it really benefits from the experience that the founders have had. The fact that they've been around, they've been Bitcoin developers of a full node implementation for years before they did Bitcoin. They've seen all of this happening. They've seen where the flaws are, and they've tried to design Decred in a way, and everything about it, from the protocol itself to the way that Politeia has been done. It's all sort of designed with experience of how it can go wrong if you don't take the right precautions.
All of that sounds really cool. And full disclosure, as we're going through and listening to what you're saying about this project, and trust me, it's going to sound like I'm maybe blowing smoke here, but I would not hesitate to shy away from telling you were shilling me a shit project if it was. It's not. I really feel like I'm probably going to become non-zero amount invested into this project. If I were, and I wanted to buy one ticket, do you know what the price would be approximately today in Decred?
It's been around 110 to 120 Decred for tickets recently.
And Decred's around 20-ish.
25, I think, maybe. But yeah, that bounces around. So
seeing as this was not a sponsored episode, we are not. I don't have enough money to buy that. So
there's a group of people that do split tickets now. You can actually you can go in with other people without giving up custody of your funds. You can generate a transaction with other people who want to buy a ticket, and you can each contribute a share of that. So so it
can be done on chain, like basically a staking pool, essentially.
Yeah, it's not really a staking, but I guess it is in some ways like a staking pool.
Yeah. I know I'm taking shortcuts there because it's not really staking, but it's similar enough.
No, it is staking. It's like it's basically from the network's point of view, like indistinguishable from any other ticket. It's just that all of the DCR to buy it didn't come from one address. It came from however many addresses, and then
it distributes the reward accordingly.
That's right. It's not a polished process at the moment, but it's kind of manual. Last time I looked at it, you had to be online at the same time as the other people who wanted to do it, and you basically had to each make your transaction within a certain amount of time of each other. But it's getting better. Like the user experience on that is getting better all the time. And there's been, I think, I saw people talking about recently, I think there's been a few hundred of these split tickets that have already been bought and voted on the network.
Yeah. So I wonder, how would that work with an actual vote if are each of their votes taken into account for the consensus,
really,
or is there one main?
These are good questions. These are really good questions.
Sorry, I love this stuff.
You're getting right into the meat of it, which that is how to handle the voting of those tickets is the reason why it's not super easy to do it, and it's not been really prioritized by most of the developers. It's because it's pretty hard to come up with a good method there. So. Obviously, I think in principle, what we would like to happen is that, say you put in 50% of the DCR, somebody else puts in 30, somebody else puts in 20, you would have that proportion of chance. It would be random who gets to vote. You could each say how you want to vote, but it would be random whose vote gets selected. But it's really hard to do that in a way which isn't gameable and which can't be manipulated by...
It also sounds like a lot of code to write. I mean, I can't code, so I have no idea, but that seems like a massive project that would need to get pushed down the line as far as priority. Yeah,
it's always about priorities, isn't it? I think the Mateus, who's the developer that was working mostly on this, I think he got it to a point where it's usable, people are actively using it, and to take it any further it would require a lot more effort and probably changes to the consensus rules if you wanted to really do it properly, such that you have loads of people buying these split tickets and it doesn't open the system up to any kind of abuse, because it's always in the end it's about trying to make it harder for people to abuse the system and to leverage their tickets more or their DCR to get more influence. Nobody wants that.
Yep, which is, I think, should be the primary goal of anything where something possibly adversarial is involved. I mean, I was a poker manager in poker rooms for a period of time, and we always had to make our rulings based on how somebody could take advantage of them the least, even if they weren't the most intuitive. So I see that a lot when we're looking at some of the governance on some of these coins and projects. And something like Cardano is actually building the staking pool into their system, but they haven't done it yet. It's coming, where a lot of things are coming with there. So it could be really interesting to keep the barrier to entry a little bit lower, but it also could be bad for the consensus. Right now, if you're looking at a barrier to entry of somewhere around $2,300 US, then that person is more likely to pay attention to what's going on than somebody who invested $200 as a portion of a pool and has just left their vote to be defaulted in some way. So
yeah,
there's always this weird balance between who should have a say over the network. Is it one person, one vote? Is it $1, one vote? Is it one coin, one vote? And I love diving into the process and seeing how it's like divvied up in the way it is now. I have one more question about the DAO and then a couple more questions about the project in general. The last question about the DAO is, does the treasury clear after a certain period of time, or does it build like a war chest?
It's been building a war chest for 3 years now. So it's got like 600,000 DCR in it, which is...
That's good. I don't like the treasuries that clear. To me, that seems like there was one called Pivx that we looked into, and they were constantly borrowing money from the community. They were like, "Hey guys, we need to borrow money. We'll pay you back when the treasury pays out again." And I'm like, "Wait, why isn't that just sitting somewhere? If you didn't use it, just leave it there."
It's Pivx is forked from Dash, so that's a feature of Dash's treasury. Which is like I've actually written a couple of articles about the Dash treasury because it's got a history. Like it's been going for years, and you can access the history. Like, so I did that. I looked at all the proposals. It's really interesting. I find it really interesting. But this is one of the problems that it seemed to me was that there was no way to save up any excess Dash in a month. Like if you don't have like enough good proposals that actually warrant the Dash that month, either you just let it get burned, or you have to just give it to projects that don't really warrant it.
That don't need it. Yeah, you would be getting a lot of just submissions for, let's go sponsor a UFC fight or something that you wouldn't need.
It's when the price went up, like obviously, like the purchasing power of the Dash treasury also went up a lot, and it led to some pretty wacky proposals, like the serious sums of money being spent on sponsoring a YouTube like series. I think it was like in the several $1 million worth.
So, well, actually, I think that was a good. So, I think we're talking about the same thing. Ben Swan was sponsored by Dash for a period. Ben Swan is an interesting character who has been fired from he was fired from Fox News, and CNN Won't Touch Him, which are the two opposing news networks in the United States that have the opposite views on the political spectrum. If neither one of them would hire him, and he was an experienced investigative journalist, he had he doesn't want to just start a YouTube channel and make like $100 a day or whatever it is. He doesn't have, that's below his pay grade almost. Maybe not $100 a day, but $100 a week or whatever. And that's below his pay grade. So they were able to sponsor him and bring him back to do his investigative research through that. And I kind of liked that. But at the same time, I don't know that it had any real direct effect on their network. I liked it because it got Ben Swan making content again. And even though he's got some real questionable stuff out there, like he had, the thing that got him fired was he started investigating Pizzagate, which was people reading into something. I won't get into like political stuff, but it was I respected a lot of what he had to say, but not that in particular. But I liked his approach to journalism, and I wished he had more of a platform. Dash did drop him because they decided it wasn't worth their money. Maybe it was a good thing that they got to get on with him, or maybe it was a bad thing. I don't know.
It's like, from my perspective, looking at the proposals, it stands out as like one of like the kind of most extreme, but there's a whole selection of these like kind of proposals which dumped like huge amounts of money into promotion, like some sort of promotion for Dash, but like probably not great value for money on it. There's another one about sponsoring high performance aircraft at like air shows and stuff. Basically stick a Dash logo on the tail fin. It's like possibly $1 million on that. Like it just seems to me it didn't seem like a good way to spend money that's supposed to be funding. Well, I don't know what Dash is supposed to be funding, but it didn't strike me as a particularly good use of the funds. But fair enough. It's cool that a cryptocurrency can do stuff like that. Masternodes voted, they got to like fund a YouTube show with like loads of money. It's pretty cool that this is happening. But if they were able to save their Dash, which is how we got into this, then perhaps they would have just saved some of that up instead of like spending it on some of the more...
Yeah, or been smarter about their sponsorships, rather than give Ben Swan a ton of money for a month or two and then quit. Maybe they give somebody similar to him less money, but still get the same result as far as adoption / notoriety for the coin or whatever they were trying to accomplish with that.
Yeah, there's another kind of interest, so there's another point of differentiation which is relevant to that between Decred and Dash. The Dash, because Dash's treasury is all on-chain, so when the votes are tallied and the super block gets produced, it's basically built so that all the money goes directly to the owners of the successful proposals. So as soon as the vote comes in, if your proposal was approved, then you get the Dash straight away, which is
right.
It's led to some problems with people. Maybe some people
not producing what they said.
If you get a Dash up front, then it's not clear what kind of arrangement you're in terms of a contract, because there's not really a recognized entity that you could be in a contract with, and I think it's hard to police that with the payments up front. But there's a whole kind of people have stepped in to act as escrow providers in the Dash ecosystem, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, Decred opts for payments in arrears by default. So that's why I mentioned it briefly before. You'd have if you did your proposal, it goes up for a vote. If it gets approved, then you do the work, then you submit an invoice, then you get paid.
Can the community vote on this is shit, it's not what you said you were going to do, you're not getting paid?
So it's not really within the system to have people voting on that, because it's not it's a really interesting question, which opens quite a big can of worms, because someone could submit a proposal, I guess, that says I've seen like where this person's going with their proposal and it's really bad. Like we should not be paying for this, but it's not very likely. Like it's not supposed to work that way. Instead, the contractors have a sustained like relationship with the project. Like almost by definition, like you kind of have to get you will have to get like a clearance to become a contractor. So then you kind of like on the team, it's in your interest then to sort of like look out for how these funded proposals are doing and try and steer them so that they deliver something good that people will appreciate. We've had that, like it's been quite interesting actually over the last few months to see like a proposal come in for someone external and then it gets approved, and then you have all the various like contractors then sort of striking up collaborative relationships with this like new person so that they can deliver the thing that they said they were going to deliver like as well as possible and that everybody's happy with it. And it's really like it's pretty interesting to see all this stuff happening. So
that's my favorite thing about the DAOs and the governance like that. I love to watch it evolve and see how things play out, because you can have theories about how people will vote or react or do anything, but you don't know until they're actually doing it. So, you won't know how somebody will react until somebody says, hey, yeah, we're going to make a podcast. It's going to be a 101. It's going to be great. And they release a 10-minute episode that says, yeah, I don't really know anything about this, but here's the triangles on the chart, and I'm going to talk about those. And you're like, that's not what we paid you for. What are you talking about? So it'll be interesting to see how that happens if somebody just kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, scams the system. But it sounds like you have to have some sort of credibility before you even get approved. Like it sounds like the community is like, I've never heard of this guy, I'm not going to approve him.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say that there's a degree of that happening. Yeah, I think it's people that are known to the community probably do have a better chance. But the payment in arrears sort of makes it less necessary in a way. Like it takes the edge off that, because somebody new, you could approve their proposal and in the knowledge that if they won't be able to like flat out scam you, because if they don't deliver anything, nobody's going to make the payment to them. So it gives you a bit more freedom as like a community to say like, well, I really like what's being proposed here. I may not know the person that's proposed it, but like we have a bit of leeway to make sure that it gets delivered on. But somebody that's familiar with the community is probably going to get a slightly better result with their proposal, because people sort of know the standard of their work and they can sort of fill in the blanks and say like, well, this person like been around, like if there's any like gaps that come up or things that don't go quite well, they'll probably like handle it well. I don't know, like it's all for this end of things, like it's still pretty early days. Like we'll see how it sort of plays out properly over the course of years, really.
is there somebody like that's given a position or told there's somebody like a CEO, CFO or something that actually gives the final approval of this is done, here's the payment?
So until this point, there's a Decred Holdings group which is in charge of the accumulated like treasury and of making payments to contractors. But there's actually a proposal up at the moment. It's being voted on right now to begin the process of decentralizing the treasury spending. So that proposal is like it's got like 97% or something approval. So it's pretty much like going to be approved. And so it gets approved, then the work will be done obviously over like, it's going to take time, like maybe up to a year for this to all like come into effect. But the way it's going to work in the future is that the people who are managing there will still be people like managing the treasury and arranging the payments to contractors. But each month they'll prepare like one transaction, and that transaction will then go up for an on-chain vote, so that all of the stakeholders with the tickets have to approve, like each month they have to say like, yes, we want this transaction that pays all the contractors to go out. And if there's something that they don't like, then they'll be able to reject that transaction and ask that it be like broken up into smaller transactions, or the offending item, the thing that they don't want to pay for, like be removed. And yeah, it'll basically give the stakeholders a fairly decent degree of control over the spending of the treasury. But at the same time, it's not like if you go too far the other direction, like you can make it into a kind of popularity contest where basically all that matters is that you can get people to vote yes on your payouts, which is probably not going to be a very healthy thing for the project. If it's everything's like really closely tied to the, like, how many stakeholders can you get to vote for you? Like that's not really a recipe for a good working environment.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I like that it would be the whole transaction, because it has to be pretty egregious for everybody to say, no, hold all of the payments to everybody. This is so bad that I'm voting no here. I cannot believe he drew a stick figure and put it out as our logo, or whatever the case may be. So that's pretty cool. I think that covers, I mean, most of the governance. I had a couple random other questions about the structure of the coin. Like, is there a privacy option, or is it just similar to Bitcoin, pseudo-anonymous?
So at the moment, it's very similar to Bitcoin, but there's some kind of privacy that's being worked on. I think there may actually be two kinds that are being worked on by different teams, but they're not. It's happening in private at the moment. I think the last word is that in the next month or 2 or 3, the company Zero developers will put out a sort of summary of their take on where the privacy option should be going, like how that should be implemented. And then we'll all vote on whether to go that direction or not. So like it's been on the roadmap for a long time that there will be a privacy option in Decred.
All right, and this is a little bit subjective, but what's your opinion on the graphical interfaces or the usability of all of the different wallets and stuff like that? Is it pretty easy for somebody who's slightly tech savvy but not necessarily a coder to get involved in the community and in the voting and all that, or is it, or is there a lot of command line work going on or terminal work, and it's kind of tough for somebody new?
So it's a good question. It's pretty easy for someone to get involved in buying tickets and voting for themselves. But there's sort of like 2 levels of that. So you can do it through the command line tools yourself, but you would probably find that you want to be running 2 or 3 wallets that can vote on your behalf, so that you know that one of them is going to be online when you're called to vote and be able to respond like quickly enough before the next sort of block gets produced, and because you can miss out on being able to vote if you don't respond quickly enough. So for that reason, there's a bit of a barrier to entry in terms of like doing it all yourself. But there's a kind of like lightweight option, which is there's a GUI wallet, Decrediton, it's called. It's really good. Like it's really nice. It has lots of like nice things built into it. Like you can see sort of like a history of how your tickets have been doing in terms of like how long it's taken them to vote, how many rewards you've earned. You can see all of the active proposals and vote through that wallet. But for buying the tickets through that wallet, you have to work with a voting service provider, it's called, which is they basically maintain the infrastructure of these like geographically distributed servers that you would want to be able to respond, and you delegate the actual act of voting to them, but you tell them how you want them to vote. So
Okay.
like, yeah.
So for the most part, it acts as if you're voting. In theory, if they kind of went off the rails, you would see it after the first time they didn't agree with, or they didn't do what people
So there's
said.
kind of, there's
So
like
it's
a
like
social contract there which says that the voter tells them how they should vote on their behalf, and anybody can check that they've voted as they were instructed. And the moment any of them decided to start voting how they wanted instead of how the voters wanted, then they would lose all of their like business pretty quickly. There's like a small fee of a few percent usually that they charge for that service.
That is how we elect our leaders here in the United States. We we pick people to go pick them. And I remember asking in school, I mean, when I'm like 10 years old, I'm like, so what happens if they don't? What happens if they just pick the other person? And as far as I know, it's never happened, but there's no like provision for what happens if they do that. We just end up with the wrong president because we voted for the wrong people, which is crazy. So I'm glad that you can see it right there, and then they would get rid of it. So this is the point where we would talk about like the trade-off profile, we like to call it, or the pros and cons if you're being super basic. As far as like, what do you think the trade-offs are of the Decred network versus, say, your standard Bitcoin or Litecoin, not necessarily versus the competitors? Is there anything that it does less good right now versus maybe something in development, or you're like, for instance, if I was talking about Monero, in the beginning I would say you're gaining privacy, but you're sacrificing speed, which is not necessarily true anymore now that they've implemented some changes. But what would that be like here?
Yeah, it's hard for me to see like how it's worse than other projects in any way. Like I can't think of any serious like con to Decred, apart from maybe like the kind of philosophy that people have taken towards the project and promoting it in particular is, I think there used to be some contention about like the fact that they weren't spending a lot of like the treasury funds on marketing and promoting the project. It's like that's kind of you could say that's the kind of con or the trade-off, is that people they're in the marathon. Like the Decred's running a marathon. It's not trying to like run a sprint. It's not trying to pump the price like next week, next month, this year. It's trying to set itself up to be around for like decades and generations. And because the holders all get a say in like how it evolves, it means that the current stakeholders are kind of incentivized. Like, you don't really want just anyone to come and like buy a bunch of Decred and start staking and getting tickets, because then they're going to have like influence. Ideally, like you would start with people that are quite like kind of committed to the ideals of the project and actually care about it, and actually like will think quite deeply about the votes and like take it seriously, and not like try and just get the price to go up so that they can like dump their bags and make some profit. So I
can definitely see that as something that you would see as a trade-off, because you look at something like Dash, which I think started around the same time, and they've got a significantly higher market cap, and you're like, man, I wish we were worth that. But at the same time, you're running into problems with the community, and we've had that same thing on the podcast. We know that there's like black hat marketing strategies or different things that we can do to increase our reach or something. We don't do that. And also, we could be on Facebook instead of Discord, and we could be interacting on there. But what we found is that because we push people to our Discord, the people who make it to the Discord are significantly more interesting than somebody who might just like us on Facebook and start, posting troll articles or whatever in a Facebook group. It's like a little filtering process, or I guess a funnel of some kind. So if you're not on our Discord, join.
Yeah,
seriously, people out there, do it. But it's a cool little feature that my co-hosts in the beginning are like, why wouldn't we have a Facebook community? I'm like, no, we want this targeted community because it's better for us overall that the people who make it to us have the voice. Like, we want to put out the content that the people who are most engaged with us are interested in hearing, which is how we even ended up with you on the show. I mean, Nathan Simmons is one of our primary listeners. He's always in there trying to help us out and find people. And he has a great Twitter following, and he reached out to you on there because he's part of the Decred community. And that's how you ended up finding us.
Shout out to Nathan.
Yeah.
Cheers.
He won an award. I think he won we do this like award show called the Crypties, and he won the award for like the most helpful team member. Or community member. Anyway, so yeah, I would see that as a trade-off. I didn't ask if this was deflationary as a currency. Is it? Is there a cap number, or is it just kind of there's a certain percentage per year?
No, it's 21 million. It gives out, and it smooths out the kind of it doesn't like drop the block reward in like huge steps like Bitcoin. It's a more gradual transition, but it's broadly like similar in terms of the time scale.
Which is another reason it's important to have a treasury that doesn't clear, because if you're running a deflationary coin, what happens in the end when there's no more money to give out? Like, there better be a treasury that can still pay people, or else, you know? So that's cool. And is it fast? What's the transaction speed?
So it's 5-minute block times, but the Lightning Network just went live on Decred's testnet and in principle,
cool.
mainnet, but it's only like it's literally just like a couple of days since it needs a consensus rule change, which has just been voted through and activated. So right about now, I'm expecting to see a lot more people starting to build things with Decred's Lightning Network.
Okay, so that would have been an example of a trade-off. Would have been that it was kind of slower, but if they're implementing Lightning Network and people actually aren't opposed to it and add it right away, whereas in Bitcoin you're seeing some resistance.
Those went those votes went through with like 99% like everybody with Decred tickets wants the Lightning Network.
Well, because of the governance system on Decred, they know that Blockstream isn't trying to gain control of the network by putting Lightning on there. They know that they can just get rid of it if they don't want it anymore, and it won't hurt the network. So I guess that's why it's like that. I would say no smart contracts, if I understand it correctly.
It's not, like the kind of like bog standard stuff, maybe like multi-sig transactions and stuff, but nothing like it's not aiming to support complicated smart contracts.
Right. So it's nothing like Ethereum. So you're not going to have smart contracts, which would be part of the trade-off. It's not necessarily a con. Just, if you're using Decred, you're not playing crypto.
It's not trying to be like a platform. It's trying to be like a money.
But as far as the pros are concerned, I mean, this is a very decentralized project. I mean, we found a couple of the points of centralization. They have checks and balances, and even the one with the payout is getting handled by the blockchain. So that, or will eventually be handled by the blockchain. So that's good. I always see a DAO as a major plus to a project. Again, almost all of the coins that I hold personally either have DAOs, are planning DAOs, they're involved in game theory in some way. And then finally, it's going to be reasonably fast. It's going to be, I like transparency. I like to have the option of privacy, but I don't like it to necessarily be all private. And I think it's really well thought out. Like the game theory behind it seems like the team that was creating it originally was thought of all of the things that I thought of right here, which I can't say for a lot of teams. I mean, a lot of these coins will come up with them and be like, how did nobody think of that? How did nobody notice that was going to be a problem?
So what people sometimes say is that there's a kind of like Decred rabbit hole that people fall down, which consists of this experience of like, after like maybe like weeks and months of like learning more about it, you can still be thinking of like things that are really like kind of niche or like esoteric, but you find that actually Decred's already been designed to make that not a problem. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, which is super appreciated whenever we learn about a project. Normally we talk about the competitors of the project, but we mentioned a lot of them here over the episode. We're talking about like Dash a lot, clearly almost a direct competitor. Any of the coins with DAOs that don't have smart contracts, I think, would be competitors to an extent. Is anything that I'm not thinking of, like Pivx, Zen, maybe Dash? Yeah. I don't even know some of the others.
I think it's fair. Like, it's the competition for like the monetary like crypto assets is pretty broad. Like, there's quite a few projects that are competing in that space, and however Like I personally think that there's probably going to be a few relative winners, projects that do well in the long term and coexist together, but they all are, in my view, in that kind of space.
All right. Well, then I think we covered it. I think this is, unless there's anything else you want to say, I would say anything else you want to mention about the project, we can do that, or anything you want to mention about where to find you, where to find the project, how to follow Decred, how to get involved in Polydia, how do you subscribe to that newsletter? Anything else you want to give our audience, now's the time.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter and on Medium. I do most of my things that I write go on Medium. They go on GitHub as well. But so if you can follow GitHub if you want to start collaborating, then GitHub's probably a good place to go. I actually have a little open source research project funded by the Decred Treasury where there are a number of open research questions where anybody that wants to or has the kind of skills or enthusiasm for it can participate in that, can do some research work. And if it's good, you can get paid from that little pot of the Treasury funds. So that's possibly worth a look for people that are interested in doing some research. Maybe you should check it out yourself. You obviously have done quite a lot of this research on these different projects.
But that doesn't mean I know how to code. I'm so scared of GitHub whenever I go there.
I use it for a little bit. I only do R coding, which is not it's stats coding. It's not proper coding. But we use GitHub for the Decred journal, to collaborate on writing the document. You can use it to write a document, just text. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's really good for any kind of collaboration where small changes matter, because the detail of where they came from and who introduced them is very well preserved, and there's a whole kind of workflow that works pretty well for editorial stuff. So yeah, we're on there with I'm on there with the journal and the Politeia Digest that I contribute to. Yeah, and I have this little research project as well that's also got a repository on there. I'm trying to collect answers to a set of questions. It's kind of similar to the kind of structure you have for these calls, or these podcasts. Is the idea is that you ask a certain set of questions about different projects, and through keeping that level of standardization, you get to some kind of rounded view.
And then hopefully they do their research properly. That's what we try to pride ourselves on, as far as the ones that we research ourselves, is we don't go in. We mention biases if we have them going into to the project, but then we try to ignore that and look at all sides of things. We've covered projects that I think I hate them, but I approached it from we covered Tron, we covered EOS. I don't particularly think that those projects are great for the space, but I gave them their due on the episodes that we covered.
Yeah, I kind of I do similar. I've personally kind of try and cover some of the projects with voting systems, proposal voting. So I do the occasional Twitter thread and stuff with say Aragon, I did that recently, kind of covered the round of proposal voting that they had and just give it an overview. So it's similar. I think it's broadly kind of similar to what you're doing, but in a different medium. Obviously this, I just use text.
Yep. Well, my typing sucks. When I type, I never learned properly, so my hands are kind of all over the place, and I always go 10. I type 10 letters too far, and then I have to delete it all really fast. I'm oh no, I went too far, and I have to go back. But anyway, that random anecdote. So that's it. No, this has been awesome. I'm glad you're here, listeners. If you're interested in maybe getting a little bit of Decred here for solving some research questions, check it out. I'm gonna definitely look at it. All those links are in the show notes if you're interested. And otherwise, thank you again for coming on the show. This has been awesome. We went way over the time we were supposed to, and I don't mind that ever. I like getting a lot of great content. So it's been awesome.
Thanks very much for inviting me on. I've really enjoyed it. It's been fun. It's the first kind of podcast like this I've done, and I've had lots of fun.
Maybe it'll set off a new round, and you'll start emailing all the other podcasts. Hey, I'll come on, and then CryptoBasic already asked me all the hard questions, so I'm good. We're done. That's one of my kind of issues is the other podcasts, they miss the stuff that I want to know when I was listening to them. Not that they're bad. I realized that I ask really specific questions. So I'm glad that our community wants to hear the dumb things that I need to ask people.
The questions today have been really good. I've been impressed. Like you've really got into the meat of stuff pretty fast.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. And of course, this has not been financial advice. We are not financial advisors. There's, do your own research. All investments have inherent risk, all that stuff. So don't sue us. All right. Well, I guess you can't even sue Richard because it's not his real name. So he couldn't do anything if you wanted to. Don't sue me. All right. Thanks, everybody.